And what's next, Hunter Campbell? We talked over the phone. He promised me, he said, if you win your next fight, title shot is next.
If you win your next fight, the title shot is next. Can you even believe that he just said that? Because I can't. Yair Rodriguez is the least deserving person for a title shot right now. And when I heard him say that shit at 4 AM, I had to crash out. I was so mad I destroyed my door like I was Rampage Jackson, which is what I will do to you, by the way, if you don't subscribe. The audacity of this guy to call for a title shot off of one win so he can fight a guy who finished him only one fight ago is absolutely crazy. But what's even crazier is that Hunter Campbell promised him that title shot. It hurts even more knowing that it's the UFC that betrayed us here. It genuinely infuriates me how delusional and oblivious the UFC has become. Because if Yair Rodriguez gets this title shot, it could actually lead to the UFC's downfall. Sorry to my Mexican viewer Jorge, I know you love Yair Rodriguez, but I have to say this. Now, before I get into why Yair Rodriguez does not deserve a title shot, first I'm going to talk about his very thin case for one. Because looking at his case for a title shot makes it very clear why he doesn't deserve one, and how absolutely insane it would be to give him one in the first place. Now, there are two reasons to why Yair Rodriguez is getting a title shot, and then the real reason that we all know, Dana White knows, the UFC knows, and Yair Rodriguez knows as well. Starting off with the first reason, which is very solid, probably the best case he has, his one fight win streak. Now, the one singular win that Yair Rodriguez is coming off of that is giving him this title shot is Patricio Pitbull. Ole, 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 ole. A 37-year-old Bellator champion making his debut in the UFC. I mean, that has to be the worst singular win to get a title shot off, outside of a guy outside the rankings or like Schmitty. I mean, you have Movsar who just beat former champ Aljamain Sterling. Meanwhile, Yair Rodriguez is beating an old Bellator guy for a title shot. Keep in mind that Yair Rodriguez's last win before this was Josh Emmett in 2023, and since that fight with Yair, Josh Emmett has gone 1-2 with one win over Bryce Mitchell and 2 losses to Ilia Topuria and Lerone Murphy, in which he got absolutely outclassed in both of them. Now, these aren't bad losses to have, but this is Yair's last win before Patricio, a win over a 38-year-old Josh Emmett, which has aged like milk. And before Patricio, he was on a 2-fight losing streak to the current champ Volkanovski, who finished him, and Brian Ortega, who after beating Yair still had to defend his ranking against Diego Lopez even though he finished Yair. And then you have Yair, who beat an unranked Patricio Pitbull, who isn't a very impressive win regardless of the fact that he was a Bellator champ, because bro was 1-2 in his last 3 before he came to the UFC. The UFC is acting like Yair Rodriguez just took out a hype prospect. He took out an elderly man. Now, the next reason that the UFC probably want to give Yair a title shot is because he's an exciting striker. I think this is also pretty obvious because the real #1 contender is Movsar Evloev, a guy that a majority of the fan base will call boring even though he really isn't. I would honestly much rather watch a Movsar fight than any Merab or Bilal fight. But the UFC really hate Movsar. I mean, Dana has made that pretty clear.
You know, I don't think that Neil's any...
Talking about Movsar at Evloev against Arnold Allen, that fight.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Neil Magny. All right. Yeah. I mean, what's his win streak like? He's on...
I think he's like 18, 19.
Yeah, 18 or 19. And yeah, that place sucked the wind right out of the fucking... That fight sucked the wind right out of the arena tonight, so it might bum him out, but he's got to deal with it. Yeah, that was the least fun fight anybody's ever seen. So
they don't want to risk having another boring champion, so instead they're going to give the title shot to a flashy striker like Yair. This reason honestly makes less sense than his very impressive singular win streak. While Yair definitely does have an exciting style and he is dangerous, the performance he's coming off of was extremely lackluster and definitely not deserving of a title shot. He went to a decision with an old Patricio. Ole, 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 ole. A guy he was supposed to and expected to finish, and he wasn't even able to really do anything until the last minute of the fight. He finally got a knockdown on Patricio, but he still didn't finish him. Overall, it was just a very mid performance over a guy who really shouldn't have been that hard. Now finally, for the real reason why Yair Rodriguez is getting a title shot. It's because he's Mexican. That's literally the only reason. Now for some context, the UFC is booked to go to Guadalajara, Mexico on September 13th, 3 days before Mexican Independence Day. And in almost every single other division, there's not a single Mexican that is close to a title shot, with the only one being Brandon Moreno.
What's that?
Former Mexican.
Former?
Former Mexican. So
You say former?
yeah.
A flyweight where if he gets a title shot, he will be fighting the champion in a quadrilogy. And he just had a quadrilogy with Davison Figueiredo. There's also Manel Kape and Kai Kara Front, so it does seem unlikely that they're going to give Moreno a title shot. And since it's a card in Mexico, they obviously want a Mexican fighter to headline the card. And since there's no one else, they want to give it to Yair. I mean, people talk about Volk versus Yair as if it's like a fact on UFC 320. I really don't know why the UFC is so insistent on having a Mexican fighter headline this card. I think Lucas Tracy makes a pretty good point here.
The UFC just has to have everybody in every single fight on a Mexico card be from Mexico. You know, we don't have to have two no-names fighting on the fucking main card just because they're from Mexico. I'm sure they would rather see JDM have a grit-down battle with Jeff Neal, despite the fact that they're not from Mexico, than two unknown fighters, one of them from fucking Dana White Contender Series, and the other guy who's about to get cut from the UFC in that same slot on a main card.
The fact that being Mexican is essentially Yair Rodriguez's only case for a title shot is crazy.
So, what was your name again? Oh, Amir Morsala. What did you have to do to earn a title shot?
It's actual Bilal, but I had to go on a 9-fight win streak, and I have not lost for 5 years.
I had to go on an 11-fight win streak and beat 3 former champions.
Pingüino sandía ara, soy una pingüino sandía ara, soy una sandía de México, soy mejor que chimpancé de banana nini.
So now we've talked about Yair Rodriguez's extremely strong case for a title shot, I think it's time to talk about how this could absolutely blow up in the UFC's face. In two ways, starting off with the less important way. If they give a title shot to Yair before they give a title shot to Movsar, the UFC's integrity is going to take a big hit, because Movsar is clearly the more deserving contender here. The guy is undefeated on a long win streak in the UFC, with multiple ranked wins over Allen and Aljo, which is way more impressive than Pitbull. He also hasn't fought Volk yet, and Volk is called for this fight many times already. The UFC just hates Movsar. It's so obvious that he should get this title shot above Yair. Now, is the fan base going to be absolutely enraged when they find out that Movsar isn't getting a title shot? Probably not. But this is going to have a lot of long-term effects on the UFC, because there are so many contenders at featherweight right now that if you give Yair a title shot, the true #1 contender has to wait even longer. And while Movsar is waiting for his title shot, the contenders are just going to pile up at the top of the division. In this case, Lerone Murphy and Gene Silva are going to be coming at the top pretty soon. Lerone Murphy is undefeated and right outside of the top 5. And Gene Silva's on a crazy win streak and he's a huge star right now. He's going to get to the top very soon. And this is just going to lead to the UFC featherweight division just getting held up for another year. So giving a title shot to Yair would actually explode the fan base. And if they do end up giving Yair a title shot, they'll be taking him away from one of the biggest fights of the year. Giving Yair a title shot means that you'll be taking him away from one of the biggest fights they could possibly make for the Mexico card. Honestly, Yair Rodriguez versus Diego Lopez could headline 320 just because of how big the beef is.
Oh, dímelo.
Culón, eres culón, ¿sabes por qué eres culón? No le pegaron a Diego entre tú y tu equipo.
Say it to my face.
No le pegaron a Diego no le pegaron a Marco entre tú y tu equipo.
Escucha.
Le pegaron a Marco entre tú y tu equipo, ¿sí o no? Esperando el momento correcto estaba para decirte esto en tu pinche cara, loco.
Oh, we were
Tú me las vas a pagar a mí por Marcos, güey. Y si me esperas la verga, güey.
Now this isn't just some beef, this is a beef about Mexican heritage, which would be perfect for a UFC Mexico card. This seems to all have started when Yair Rodriguez talked about Diego Lopez representing Mexico in his media day.
You know, we spoke with Diego Lopez last week, and you know, there's some people online that troll him from Brazil because he lives in Mexico and trains in Mexico now, and they think he should be representing Brazil. So if he did win the title, would you view him as a Mexican champion or would you view him as a Brazilian champion?
I love this country. I have said this in the past. You can go back look at my interviews. I love this country because it gave me the opportunity to have a job, meet great people, have great friends here. But not because of that I'm gonna say I'm American. I am not. I'm Mexican. I'm proud of it. You know, so whenever you ask me, yes, I have a problem with that.
Nothing really came of this until UFC 314, where obviously, as we saw, they had a really heated argument. It started with Yair calling him a culon, which insinuates that Diego Lopez had a BBL. This obviously led to Diego Lopez getting pretty angry for the first time, and then Yair Rodriguez accused Diego Lopez of attacking his teammate Marco. This then led to Yair Rodriguez saying that he'll make Diego's team pay, which came off as a threat to Diego Lopez to where he said, "Don't threaten my team again." And if Yair was even thinking about threatening Alexa Grasso, I definitely have to step in. But ultimately, it's a heated beef about Mexico that would be perfect for a Mexico card. However, if Yair Rodriguez gets a title shot, this fight will obviously not happen, completely ruining the chance of ever seeing this fight at the same level of hype it is right now. And if the UFC can't even make a fight that's being served to them on a silver platter, then the fans are going to completely lose hope for any big fights that can happen soon.
Finna take that lounge truck to Japan. Get your bands up. Yes, she can.